This game has so much more meaning for so many people, especially those in the generations above you and I. Even though it's been completely one sided the last 15 years, this game still means something for you. Your background, growing up a Tennessee fan, attending the university, being a Vol Radio Network alum, VFL Films, all that type of stuff. Now working at Alabama and really just coming into your own and kind of doing your own thing now. It's kind of a unique week for you, but still for you especially, this game means a lot.
It really does. And it really started because of how I grew up and just the respect I had for the Tennessee and Alabama rivalry. And I've been telling a few people down here, like, I think this has the most buzz we've had around a Tennessee Alabama game since the 90s, since,
Yeah.
I would say even 96 when Alabama was undefeated going into that game. Tennessee had the Florida loss, but was still ranked pretty high. And Tennessee ended up winning on the long run from Jay Graham. But it's really been since that game where you have both teams playing at their peak at the same time. And usually it's just a very streaky, very up and down rivalry. We've seen a long winning streak for Alabama in the Coach Saban era. Coach Fulmer had his long winning streak. Coach Majors had a good one, and that was followed by a great one for Coach Bryant as well. But I just grew up really in awe of this rivalry, and partly because from my family on my dad's side, we had family on both sides of the rivalry a little bit, mostly Tennessee, but a little bit of Alabama as well. So grew up with a strong respect for all things Crimson Tide, and really was fascinated as a kid with Bear Bryant too, and really learned about him. And that was kind of my entry into Alabama sports as it would turn out down the road. But it's just such a great game full of so much history. And I just go back to my grandfather who grew up a Tennessee football fan in the 1930s. I mean, that was the game. That was usually one of the only times they were on the radio where they could get it in his small town where he grew up in Dayton, Tennessee. So, and that was the game that really put Southern football on the map in a lot of ways. I think there were some of those great Alabama teams in the 20s that went west to the Rose Bowl, captured the nation's attendance, but there really wasn't a Southern football rivalry that got the nation's attention quite like what we saw with Tennessee and Alabama in the 1930s. And people around Alabama remember as well, there was a time period where Alabama and Auburn didn't play every year. The rivalry was suspended from the early 20th century till about 1948 or so. So for the formative years of Alabama football, Tennessee was the rivalry. And of course, we have the cigar tradition. People go crazy for that now. I think the younger generation has kind of taken that and run with it as well. So it's great that this game has the meaning that it has once again.
It's just so funny to me because I mean, there's some dumb NCAA rules and everything, but technically that's an NCAA rule. Obviously, you don't want student athletes and smoking cigars, but it's just so funny, man. It's a cloud of smoke one way or the other, regardless of where you are, and the smell just stays with you. Hey, what about this team, or really this matchup? I mean, whenever everything was going on with Tennessee, with Jeremy Pruitt, leaving the program and the investigation and all that more Tennessee drama, right? I kind of said this on the 2 minute drill the other day, and it's kind of unique. If you sit back and just think about it, fast forward 18 months, could you ever imagine that Tennessee is playing a top six showdown between undefeated teams, third Saturday in October? I mean, this is quite the accelerated rebuild for Tennessee. Of course, it's not there yet for Josh Heupel, but I just feel like this match in particular, no one saw coming, a year and a half ago, and seeing Tennessee being in position to be a good football team and take on and play with a great football team like Alabama.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it started last year with the game in Tuscaloosa. That was a really fight for the Crimson Tide for the first three quarters, spilling into the fourth quarter. And that was with what we all knew was a roster that Josh Heupel inherited that had so many players leave the program in the transfer portal. And he was able to compete with Alabama with a roster that really wasn't his own. So now as he keeps getting more of his players and Hendon Hooker continues to come into his own at quarterback, it really is remarkable the sharp turnaround that Tennessee's been able to have. And it so quickly as well. And we just kind of knew going into this season, if Tennessee could beat Florida, Tennessee could beat Pitt early in the year. And then, of course, even the LSU game, we were all kind of still a little nervous about that trip to see whether or not the Vols would still be undefeated going into this matchup. But they certainly took care of business from the opening kickoff. So Tennessee's held up its end of the bargain. Certainly Alabama has as well, with an undefeated start to the season, going 6-0, including 3-0 in the SEC.
All right, so let's get to this Alabama team. You're on the you're on the ground level there. You get a good view of it. We'll talk about the quarterback injury situation here in a moment, but I know the listeners and viewers of this podcast and people who read my work are sick and tired of me saying this, but you know me, I love football. I love watching good football players play, and I said this to you over the summer at SEC Media Days. Will Anderson Jr. is the best football player on college on the planet. He just is. What's Tennessee going to have to do to slow him down?
It's going to take a lot because it's not just Will Anderson Jr. It's also Dallas Turner coming off the other edge, and then Chris Braswell will be coming in there as well. They have what they call the cheetah package when those three are on the field. And then it was funny, I interviewed Henry Toto yesterday for some of our content, and he goes, hey, I'm part of the cheetah package as well. Like he's pretty proud to be out there as well, helping direct those guys. But it's a fast, physical defense. I think the defense has played at a really solid level all season for Alabama. And you look back to the Texas A&M game, yes, it was 24-20, but 17 of Texas A&M's points were scored off turnovers. I think the defense has a much different night if Alabama doesn't turn the football over like we saw. So it's a defense that's played extremely well. They're very fast and physical, and I think along the defensive line, they're starting to look like Alabama a little bit more. When you look at Jaheim Otis, being over 340 pounds, I mean, he's impossible to block, and he also has some size and quickness to him. Tim Smith, Tim Keenan, some other really strong guys. DJ Dale at the nose guard position as well. So it starts there, and then you have the edge rushers, and the secondary is still probably a work in progress at this point for the Crimson Tide, but that's where Coach Saban spends most of his time during practice. He loves coaching up.
Lucky them.
Yeah, exactly. The defensive backs always have two coaches watching them at all time at the very minimum. So it's a defense I think that is playing really well going into this matchup against Tennessee, and I think the biggest question mark I have coming in this matchup is how can Alabama play with tempo like Tennessee is going to play with, because they really haven't seen an up-tempo style like this all throughout the season.
I do want to have a question real quick, and I mean, I haven't watched every single Alabama game. I've seen them a couple times, obviously, but why isn't Eli Ricks a bigger impact?
That has been a question we've been asking a lot as well, because we heard all the hype coming in from LSU when he transferred over. He was a preseason All-American in the summer, and everyone just assumed he would be a lockdown corner along with Kool-Aid McKinstry. Kool-Aid McKinstry certainly is for the Crimson Tide. He's playing at a pretty high level, but there's been the emergence of a redshirt freshman named Terrion Arnold who has really played well. And, he ended up making the game-winning play when he was able to help force a pass breakup against Texas A&M at the very end of the ball game. And he's just played physically strong as anybody can play at a cornerback position. And if you're able to play up to Nick Saban's standard for that position, I mentioned that's where he spends all of his time in practice. That speaks volumes. So, we've seen Eli Ricks here and there, but he still hasn't cracked the rotation quite as much as we thought. He did get some playing time against Arkansas, but we didn't see his name called very much against Texas A&M. But that has been one of the storylines this year, because, again, going into the season, we figured he would be a huge part of this defense.
Roger Hoover, the Crimson Tide Sports Network, here on the show. Roger, biggest storyline of the week, obviously, who's going to play quarterback for Alabama? I know you don't have that answer right now. It's going to be a day-by-day thing. What needs to happen for Bryce Young to get back out there? Exited 2 weeks ago, and the Arkansas win for Alabama, did not play against A&M. And if no Bryce Young, what does Tennessee need to be aware of? Jalen Milroe, and of course, another option potentially could be a Ty Simpson.
Well, starting with Bryce Young, it's all going to be about just pain management and tolerance at this point from the AC joint sprain that he suffered against Arkansas, because even that day he tried to warm up, getting ready for the second half, wanted to come back in the game, but ultimately the medical staff said it wasn't the best idea for him to do that. Jalen Milroe finishes that game, and then throughout the week, last week, he was able to practice some, and it was really day by day. He may have had a good day one day and not been able to throw as much the next, and then we pretty much learned during pregame warmups when he was able to take snaps, but then he didn't throw at all in pregame warmups against Texas A&M. So by that point, we kind of realized it would be Jalen Milroe that would play and start and play every snap of the Texas A&M game. So I think it's once again going to come down to pregame warmups just to see how he feels, and I'm sure this week he'll be able to throw a little bit more in practice. There's some cautious optimism, it sounds like, around Bryce Young entering this week, but again, it's all about how he's feeling just in the moment coming up on Saturday in those pregame warmups once he's on Shields Watkins Field, because up until then, you really can't tell. I mean, practice really is important as well. He needs to be able to show in practice that he can handle the strain of throwing with that right shoulder in order to be able to be counted on during the game on Saturday. So if he's unable to go, Jalen Milroe started the Texas A&M game, and he is a fast, dynamic runner. Some people have called him on Alabama's defense, they've called him the fastest quarterback they've ever seen. And I think anybody that sees the tape of that 77-yard run he had against Arkansas will certainly attest to that. And that was really the play of the season to this point, because at that point it was a 28-23 game on the road. All the momentum was with Arkansas. All of it ended right on that run as Alabama was able to punch it in after he got close to the goal line, went up 35-23, and it was really never a game again after that. So he's a very physical runner. It was like 12 of 19 passing, 111 yards against Texas A&M. There were a few drops mixed in there, and he did have an interception as well. And 111 yards is not what this offense needs. They need, closer. Bryce Young consistently delivers, 300, 400 each time out. So I think the passing game is going to be a focus for him throughout this week of practice in case he does have to play in the spot of Bryce Young. But I've heard the name Ty Simpson as well. I think still Alabama would stick with Milroe if Bryce is unable to go, because he knows the offense. The offense has a lot of confidence in him, and I think he will be able to make those throws as time goes on, specifically as he gets closer to next year, when it'll be a battle between he and Ty Simpson for the starting quarterback job once Bryce goes to the NFL. But there's a lot of confidence around Jalen Milroe, especially with how physical he plays. I mean, he and Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield at the same time, very hard to slow down.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you just pulled off. Technically, he didn't get the Arkansas win, but you win the Arkansas game. You win, A&M game. If Young can't go, he's without a doubt starting for sure. Just how can Tennessee be effective against that? All right, I said 8 minutes. We're almost at 13 minutes, and I have one more question. Do you have time?
I'll go for it.
All right. This offense outside the quarterback position, it starts and stops. Jahmyr Gibbs, what a dynamic player, leading the team in rushing, leading the team in receiving. What are the challenges in trying to corral Jahmyr Gibbs? And then these receivers look like it kind of took them a little bit while, but it seems like they're kind of coming into their own now. There's Jermaine Burton's there, formerly of Georgia, of course, but there's no Mechie, there's no Williams there anymore. Some new faces, but it looks like they're starting to settle in a little bit now midway in the season.
Starting to settle in. We still haven't seen that one dynamic receiver kind of emerge out of that group. It's been very much by committee so far this season. Jermaine Burton's really talented, who transferred from Georgia, and Bryce was able to target him pretty early in the season, but then his production has dropped off over the last few games, even though he did have a touchdown against Texas A&M. And then beyond that, Trayshawn Holden is really physical. He's tough to tackle, especially when he has the ball in the open field. Kobe Prentice is somebody they like a lot. He's speedy. He's able to go on the outside. He's able to take the cover off the secondary occasionally, but they're still waiting to see JoJo Earl be completely healthy, as he had a foot injury in preseason camp, and then also dealing with injuries. Tyler Harrell, who transferred from Louisville, and he was able to go through some pregame warmups this past Saturday. I think we'll learn more about his status from Coach Saban as the week goes along, but he's also a speedster, very much in the vein of Jameson Williams, who was so good last season in this Alabama offense. But the leading receiver so far is Jahmyr Gibbs, and he's also the leading rusher. And, some people think he could be a 1,000-yard rusher as well as catch 1,000 yards worth of passes for what he's going to be able to do this season. He's just so fast, and he's able to hit the hole quickly. He's elusive. And going back to that Arkansas game, he had 2 touchdown runs of over 70 yards that completely put that game away. So Jahmyr Gibbs, we're certainly glad he's in Crimson, because he is extremely fast. He looks like he's going to have an Alvin Kamara type career in the NFL as well. I mean, it's the exact same skill set that he brings to the table as what we saw AK bring to Tennessee and then the NFL.